But do people ever take a second to think why the richest empire in modern human history, probably ever, has millions of people that are hungry, that can't even provide food for themselves without a welfare state? We have a working poor. We have a working hungry class. What kind of barbaric state devalues work to the point where you can be a working class person and you still have food insecurity, where you still are hungry? This is the failure of capitalism. Like, I remember so many Democrats, so many progressives was kind of in shambles when they saw that video from Bernie Sanders, because you guys know, if you're a partisan, if you're a Democrat, and if you're a liberal, you have a memory of a goldfish. Like, these people are just now immigration activists. They forgot what Democrats have done. Where, like, Joe Biden and Barack Obama deported more people, and I explained in my hotspot video, because Democrat immigration policy is more cruel in practice. Their fake virtue signaling they do towards Latinos to win their votes during election season, so they pretend to be pro-immigrant, and then the second they get here, they lock their ass up in cages. So that's why, like, the Democrats are generally the most effective evil, because border crossings are down, like what Bernie says. That's a fact. Because Trump and Republicans, at least they're honest. They say, man, if you come over here, I know we're responsible for this because we sanctioned and starved and destabilized your regions. But if you come over here, we're gonna fuck you up. That's the, you know, I don't agree with that. I explained many times before, I'm more of a freedom of movement guy. But that's the Republican position now. Border crossings are down. This dynamic is why Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Democrats tend to deport more. And it's very annoying to me that Democrats and progressives are only immigration activists when a Republican is in charge. You have to understand that we're fighting one giant empire with one shared vision in mind, and that is to make profit based on the prison industrial complex. That's why they sanction countries to death, destabilize other regions, allow an immigration crisis to happen so they can sell prison beds. You have DHS that has record funding, and you had the border industrial complex and all the companies who make those like robot dogs, all the weaponry that I covered this during the Biden administration, how they explained how the border industrial complex was booming under Joe Biden. Wonder if I can find an article quickly. Here's one article that this is not exactly one I quoted, but look, Joe Biden is delivering big for the border industrial complex. So I'm assuming that Todd Miller's referring to what I'm referring to, because if you follow RBN, I covered this. I covered how they had this giant expo. It was like Comic-Con for ICE, because Joe Biden just passed his record budget that Donald Trump surpassed, but he passed his record budget, and it was amazing for DHS. So you guys understand what the Democratic Party do, and people think this is better. They lie to immigrants. They tell immigrants, like, oh, guys, we believe in asylum. And then when they get here, the Democratic Party sell them out to the prison industrial complex. I am not a lesser of two evils guy. You guys know that. I'm a post-duopolist. But how is this preferable? I want to read these stats out because Carl will be joining us here soon. I want to cover as much as I can during my opening monologue here. Let's see if I can. I know I covered this a lot. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Here it is. This shows how much I covered this. We understand that the empire always doubles down and they always crank it up a notch. Barack Obama was the deporter in chief. Donald Trump tried to surpass him and failed. So now Donald Trump, after failing to do to actually hit the numbers that Democrats hit, they're trying to compensate with that by expanding ICE budgets, but they just don't have the callousness. They don't have the calculating evil that the Democratic Party has. As they tell Latino families that are a party of immigrants, this was under Biden. The Biden administration put out its 2023 budget, which proposed a $97.3 billion for DHS, the agency's largest in 2 decades. So Donald Trump is without a doubt greatly expanding ICE. But this was started and enabled under Democrats. The DHS and ICE, just like corporations, is they have never-ending expansion. Every fiscal year they have to have more. Which is why when we talk about abolish ICE, defund the police, we are taking the fiscally conservative position. It's the libertarians like Dave Smith, these people who claim they're a small government. No, you're not. You are supportive of giant spending for DHS, border security, the NYPD. How can you say you're a fiscal conservative when you support $10 billion on the NYPD and you guys still don't feel safe? These conservatives in New York like, I don't feel safe in New York. We're spending $10 billion there on policing. How are you still not feeling safe? At what point do you realize that this is a failure of neoliberal policies? And as we're seeing the military-industrial complex expand to $1 trillion budget under Donald Trump, as we see ICE and DHS being funded to record levels, we have capitalist breadlines that are returning to the United States. Once again, capitalism never worked whenever it's been tried, my friends. SNAP funding expiration set to hit 40 million people. Jesus Christ. And we need to absolutely stand with our brothers and sisters who are victims of this capitalist regime. But do people ever take a second to think why the richest empire in modern human history, probably ever, has millions of people that are hungry, that can't even provide food for themselves without a welfare state? We have a working poor. We have a working hungry class. What kind of barbaric state devalues work to the point where you can be a working class person and you still have food insecurity, where you still are hungry? This is the failure of capitalism. The richest country, 40 million people that rely on SNAP funding that is now is gone. Donald Trump has to send more money to Israel, guys. Sorry. He's sending billions of dollars to Argentina to bail out Javier Milei. That's the priority of this capitalist ruling class, is to preserve their ideological projects, which is why they sanction and they economically retaliate against countries who have different central planning models like Cuba. But despite the Cuban embargo and the Cuban sanctions and the hostilities, Cubans, they still have a higher life expectancy rate than we do. They have a higher literacy rate than we do. How are Americans acceptable, or how can they accept this level of mediocrity out of the most powerful country in the world? And whenever capitalists on Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, whenever they talk about economics, they always sound ridiculous to me because they bring up metrics that doesn't fucking matter. They're like, oh my God, we have amazing GDP growth. Fuck your GDP growth. We have millions of people homeless. We have people who cannot afford to own a house. We have breadlines that are back because the failure of your governance. Meanwhile, China has a zero hunger plan that has been modeled by humanitarian organizations all over the world. You guys know they cut hunger in half by 2015. Still making amazing progress to this day. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. And you want to know what the United States reaction to capitalist breadlines returning? Donald Trump's reaction is not to solve the problem. We're just not going to track it anymore. USDA canceled survey tracking how many Americans struggle to get enough food. So if what the capitalists do when they realize they can't solve a problem, they just decide not to track it anymore. So while people talk about stock growth, the stock market, GDP growth, they essentially, in order to talk about our economy, they bring up how good millionaires are doing. Even though Americans have no faith, no optimism in the future, you have millions hungry. 1 out of 5 children. Look at this. That's crazy. 1 in 5 children, over 13 million kids don't have enough food to grow up strong. Imagine defending such a failed system. Like the people like Dave Smith, I literally called this man out multiple times. I called him out again a few days ago. Because I'm like, do you want to debate anyone else other than a shit lib? Because imagine defending this system that creates such massive amount of poverty despite the trillions of dollars that we stole from other countries. Despite the trillion of dollars that we stole from the global south, they still left your ass poor. You're not a capitalist. You're an exploited worker, my friend. Look at this. 50 million turned to food banks, pantries for help. See, what we want a central planning model. We want a system where your work can make it so not only can you feed yourself, but feed your family. We want your family to thrive. We want your work to be valued. The whole point of the capitalist system is to devalue your work and to believe that you have to have 2 jobs just to feed you and your family. So there's so many of these damning statistics on our system. And you want to know who voted against making food a human right? They said, Nick, your policies are just anti-American. Well, if you're one of 2 countries, including your colony, the United States and Israel are the only countries who voted against making food a human right. And I feel like if your politics is anti the country that voted against food as a human right, I think that's very valid. One thing is not built like the other. And this is what many social democrats and many liberals don't understand. They're like, well, don't you know that China and Russia, just because we corrupt don't mean other countries not corrupt. Fam, you have no idea. We are dealing with a different level of evil with our ruling class, and many Americans can't reconcile with that. The liberal thought is like, well, our government is corrupt. Other people's government are corrupt too. Hey, just all governments are corrupt. That's like more the libertarian Trotskyist style of thinking. All governments are corrupt. Yeah, we got to oppose China too. We got to oppose Xi Jinping too. Because don't you know he's an oppressive ruling class? Even though 80% of Chinese people support their government, Chinese people are optimistic about the future. 90% of millennials own their home. China support food as a human right. But Trotskyists and social democrats are like, we gotta condemn China. No, you know they got an oppressive ruling class just like us. No, they don't. That's pure American code. We have the ruling class that supports bombing hospitals, bombing children. We have the ruling class that supports starvation as a tool of war.